Will Toho ever make another King Kong movie? Let's talk about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, look at Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
Godzilla Minus Zero is set to come out this November, and plenty of fans are still wondering whether or not if Godzilla will have another monster to fight. I've seen some debates if there will be a brand new monster, or possibly one that we've already seen before, like Mothra, Rodan, Anguirus, or King Ghidorah. I highly doubt that it's going to be King Kong because I think there would be a bit more hype surrounding it. But it also made me think about the possibility that Kong might actually have a future with Toho. For those who are not familiar, the original King Kong from 1933's copyright is set to expire on January 1st, 2029, placing the film within the public domain. This is expected to create a whirlwind of rights issues between studios. You see, there are lots of different studios that own a portion of the rights to King Kong. Both the original film and the sequel Son of Kong used to be owned by RKO but are now owned by Warner Brothers. King Kong vs. Godzilla and King Kong Escapes are both owned by Toho in Japan, while the American rights are owned by Universal Studios. The De Laurentiis films are owned by Paramount Pictures. The Peter Jackson remake and the theme park attractions are owned by Universal again, and of course the MonsterVerse films are owned by Legendary Pictures. Now, obviously, all later versions after the RKO movies will still be copyrighted, but once the original film falls into the public domain, that means anyone will be able to make their own version of King Kong. So you are going to have all kinds of cheap imitations, but that also means that Toho might be able to make a new Kong movie someday. The last time that Toho did anything with Kong was way back in 1967 with King Kong Escapes. So it would be fascinating to see what they could do now after all these decades without having copyright problems holding them back. But it's crazy to think that so many Kong movies have actually been cancelled because of rights issues. Throughout the 60s and 70s, the British horror movie studio Hammer was trying to produce a remake of King Kong with special effects by the collaborative efforts of stop-motion artists David Allen, Jim Danforth, and Ray Harryhausen. They even created test footage of Kong fighting the airplanes atop the Empire State Building, animated by David Allen. Unfortunately, Hammer was not able to secure the rights from RKO, who had a policy at the time against remaking King Kong, so the project wound up falling through. Though the Kong puppet would end up being repurposed for a popular Volkswagen commercial, so at least it was not a complete waste. Also, if you watch Hammer's 1 Million Years BC or When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, it'll give you a pretty good idea of what their version of Kong might have been like.
The flesh-eating Allosaurus. The Triceratops, a horned dinosaur in battle with the savage Ceratosaurus.
But then, while this was going on, Universal was trying to produce their own remake called The Legend of King Kong. This version had plenty of concept art and storyboards made for it, and Joseph Sargent was set to direct, but RKO once again tried to stop the film from being made because of their no remakes policy. But instead of just canceling the film, Universal fought back, resulting in a huge copyright battle with RKO, Paramount, and even the family of Marion C. Cooper, the creator of the original King Kong, who argued that they were the ones who owned the rights. Universal made the defense that the novelization of the original King Kong, written by Delos W. Lovelace, was already public domain, which turned out to be true. To make things even more complicated, RKO had since changed their policy on remakes, which is how Dino De Laurentiis was able to secure the rights for his remake in 1976. That's right, if it were not for RKO's stupid policy, we could have had 3 Kong remakes back to back. Could you imagine that? Being able to choose between 3 different Kong movies? Universal was ready to go forward with their own remake, but because the De Laurentiis remake turned out to be underwhelming, Universal would postpone their remake all the way until 2005 with Lord of the Rings director Peter Jackson. By the end of the 1980s, Toho actually wanted to make a second King Kong vs. Godzilla, having the monsters rematch after 27 years, featuring those updated special effects that the Heisei era is best known for. But unfortunately, when they tried getting the rights from Universal, who had since acquired the rights to King Kong, Universal asked for too much money for them to use the character. After that, Toho instead opted to make a film where Godzilla would fight Mecha Kong, since it was technically an original character. But even that was considered too close to King Kong, so Universal shot that down as well. So instead, Toho settled on making Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah in 1991. Now, that is a huge letdown, but what's strange is that when I was a kid, I could have sworn that there was a 90s version of King Kong vs. Godzilla, probably because I remember seeing these two VHS covers sitting side by side at my local video store, not realizing that they were both the same movie. The only difference is that one of the covers was honest and the other one tries to trick you. In fact, the DVDs did the exact same thing, which only furthered my confusion. To this day, I still get frustrated whenever I see this box cover with the 1984 version of Godzilla and the 1976 version of Kong just photoshopped right next to each other. As a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing ever, but now, it's just a reminder of a film that we should have gotten but never did. The '76 remake of King Kong is undoubtedly a flawed movie, but the special effects by Rick Baker are a huge highlight. Kong's rampage in New York City is like something straight out of a Heisei-era Godzilla flick. I know that it came out earlier and it's an American film, but I always wish that we could have had a movie where the Baker version of Kong fights the Heisei version of Godzilla, and I know that lots of other fans wish that we could have had the same thing. Seeing these two monsters going head to head would have been a visual spectacle. It could have even been one of the greatest monster movies of all time. But because of all of the complicated copyright issues between Universal, RKO, Paramount, and the Cooper estate, we will never know what this rematch could have been like. It really sucks because we were basically robbed of some amazing films that could have been, but never were. It's almost like a big giant Kong-sized middle finger to the audience. The original King Kong from 1933 utilized a number of film techniques that were still new at the time, many of which had never even been perfected before. It is definitively one of the most important films of all time, and King Kong is the grandfather of all giant monsters. He is just as much of a cultural icon as Godzilla, but it seems like he's hardly ever had his time on the big screen, especially compared to Godzilla. I mean, think about this. Godzilla has been in 38 movies, soon to be 39 with -0, but Kong has only ever been in 13 movies, one being an underwhelming sequel, one being an underwhelming remake, one being a god-awful sequel to the remake, and one being a lousy animated musical. Oh, sorry, I meant to say 2 animated musicals.
Kong, Kong, Kong! Protector, you'll stay. Things are better this way.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. She's totally blind. Stay here with your kind.
Okay, I'll stop abusing your ears, but it really seems like Kong has always gotten the short end of the stick as far as movies go. I mean, of course we still have the MonsterVerse, but the problem with the MonsterVerse is that there are times where it almost feels too safe. I'm not a hater of these movies, the MonsterVerse has had plenty of highlights, especially with Kong. Skull Island did an amazing job at revitalizing the character, but that was almost 10 years ago, and at this point, it's almost like the Avengers or Guardians of the Galaxy, and the thing is, these are not superhero movies. Sure, Godzilla and Kong both have superhero qualities, but at their core, they are still giant monsters that kill people and destroy entire cities. When you compare New Empire to -1, or even if you compare Godzilla 2014 to Shin Godzilla, Toho has shown that they are willing to take huge risks with their own franchises, so now it would be real fascinating to see what they would be able to do with Kong. This is honestly a great time for a kaiju fan to be alive, because now we have both a Japanese Godzilla and an American one. -1 has reminded us that it's okay to have different cinematic versions of these monsters, but what about Kong? It only seems like a fair trade to have Toho making their own Kong movies again, and since the copyright is getting ready to expire, they can finally do that. But what exactly would Toho do with Kong in this day and age? I don't think they'll be rematching him with Godzilla for a while, since it seems like they already have plans with the Godzilla films. Personally, I think a standalone movie would be great too, kind of like a modern version of King Kong Escapes, so maybe we can get Mecha Kong back. I don't want Kong to always be tethered to Godzilla. All I want is for him to finally stand on his own again. If Godzilla can have standalone movies, then so can Kong. I've heard some fans complain that Toho should have already made a Kong movie by now because of all the royalties from the MonsterVerse, but I do have a personal conspiracy theory as to why they haven't done that. Hold on, let me get my tinfoil hat. Okay, so here is my theory. I believe that Toho is purposely waiting out on the expiration date. Think about it. Why would they waste money for licensing to use Kong if the copyright is just going to expire in a few years anyway? If Kong goes public domain, not only does Toho get to make all the Kong movies they want, but it also gives them the opportunity to trademark their own version of the character, which means they would also be able to make even more money selling merch of it. But if they did make a Kong movie, how would it be made? I think most people instantly assume that Kong would have to be CGI, and yeah, that would be my first assumption as well. But at the same time, it's not like Suitmation is completely dead. Toho still does a lot of Suitmation with tokusatsu franchises like Ultraman. Or it would be real impressive to see if they could mix CGI with animatronics. Think something like the Jurassic Park franchise. Part of what makes those movies so memorable was how they were able to create an illusion where it was hard to tell what was CGI and what was animatronic. When you mix practical effects with CGI, it often helps suspend the viewer's belief. If Rick Baker can do something like this all the way back in 1976, then imagine what you could do now.
We have 27 servo motors in the face of this thing to provide all of these expressions, which is why it takes 4 puppeteers on the outside plus me inside them to really bring it to life.
Sweet. Aww. And then he can go to angry.
I know, this is all just wishful thinking. I am not any kind of authoritative source, I am just a fan on the internet sharing my thoughts on a beloved franchise. One thing is for sure though, when Kong enters the public domain, you are going to have lots of different studios fighting and competing for their own versions of the characters, and of course you're going to have the cheap knockoffs. Trust me, I know exactly what to expect. Obviously, copyright and intellectual property are important, but some of the most classic stories ever written are in the public domain, and we've seen all kinds of adaptations because of it. Look at Dracula, look at Frankenstein, look at A Christmas Carol, or Wizard of Oz. Does anyone remember way back in 2005 when we had 3 different movie adaptations of The War of the Worlds? We need something like that to happen with Kong. The 8th wonder of the world should belong to everybody because, let's face it, Kong has evolved into something more than just an American icon or a pop culture icon. King Kong is a symbol of the imagination, just like Santa Claus or the Boogeyman, and those characters are public domain as well, so Kong fits right in. The image of a giant gorilla holding a girl atop the Empire State Building while fighting off airplanes is one of the most iconic images in all of cinema. Perhaps it is even the most iconic. There are so many parodies, rip-offs, and homages. Even if you haven't seen the movies, almost everyone has at least heard of them in some shape or form, because that's how iconic King Kong has become, and soon, he will belong to the world. So all we can do is hope that Toho will approach the character again after all these decades of copyright holding them back. The time is finally upon us, and the world is ready for the return of the king.
Connect 4, the game where you've got to think big to connect 4 and win. Connect 4, the big game in town.